me some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Guys, last night, myself and some of my compadres from the 2-3 squad, when I was assigned there back in, this was December 2001, September 2001, we had all gone through, of course, the infamous 9/11, the World Trade Center bombing. And on December 1st, 2001, the 2-3 precinct in Spanish Harlem, known affectionately as El Barrio, had 4 homicides that day. 2 single homicides and 1 double, which amounted to 4 homicides in one day in that precinct. The most famous or the most infamous one, at least the one that was caught the attention of the television show New York Homicide, as well as many years ago, the same case was featured on a TV show called The Perfect Murder on the Investigation Discovery Channel. And in being interviewed for this show, I was asked to give them a notorious case that would be both riveting and sort of a whodunit. They didn't want a simple homicide case that was solved 1, 2, 3. They wanted a case that was involved many aspects of investigation. And we gave them this case. And this case involved Carmen Quinones, who was an East Harlem grandmother who owned a brownstone on East 101st Street, right off Park Avenue. And if you know the area of Spanish Harlem, right at Park Avenue at that location below the ground is the Metro North train station. So just to give you a geographic picture, and going eastbound is Lexington Avenue. So the apartment was just off Park Avenue. And it was a 3-story brownstone that was purchased, I believe, in the 1980s for a pittance, tens of thousands of dollars. And in 2001, it was probably worth, I would say, $500,000 to $600,000 maybe. And I'm just guesstimating. I believe today that same building would probably be worth in more than $2 million. It's a 3-story, 3 floors, 3 different apartments. So that's the nature of real estate in New York City. However, this case, the reason this case was so infamous and so interesting was that Carmen was a grandmother who took care of her granddaughter, Ashley De Jesus. And from her daughter, Amy De Jesus, who was the mother, who at the time of the homicide was attending Canisius University up near Buffalo, New York. And the father, who Carmen Quinones was estranged from, actually lived on the 3rd floor of this very building, 100 East 101 Street. That struck us as a little bizarre, that you get divorced, but yet your ex lives on the 3rd floor in the same building with you. And on the 2nd floor, there were tenants. So on the morning or the afternoon of the murder, Carmen and her boyfriend were in her apartment on East 101st Street. And 2 men who were dressed as detectives, identified themselves as detectives, got into the building. And Carmen was very suspicious of how they got into the building because you needed two keys to enter this building: a key to the outer door, which got you into the vestibule, and the key into the hallway that's actually got you into the building. They knocked on the door, and Carmen said right away before she opened the door, "Who let you in the building?" And right away, they had the names of the tenants on the second floor. And they said, so and so let us in. So Carmen sort of was disarmed by that. She opened the door, and Raymond Mundo stabbed her in the chest and continued to assault her as he went into the apartment, and the door to the outer hallway where his associate, uh, Rafael Rios, aka Doggy, waited to assist him. The door slammed. Now Rafael Rios, aka Doggy, is locked in the hallway. And Mundo is struggling with Carmen, and uh, Ruben Frederick, Carmen's boyfriend, comes to her aid and hits Mundo over the head with a flower pot, cuts him open, and starts fighting with him. And at some point, he almost gets the better of Mundo. Then Mundo somehow reaches back, opens the door to the hallway, and Dog comes into the apartment and starts stabbing the hell out of both of them. Carmen Quinones and Ruben Frederick were both stabbed over 20 times. Now, the 3-year-old granddaughter is in another room, and she witnesses this whole thing. So the two killers are deciding over whether or not they should kill her or just let her live, because she's 3 years old. She's not going to be able to identify them. So they reasoned that, and they let her live. They just duct taped her, and they kept her on the bed by the television. And then they left the apartment. At some point, the Amy De Jesus, who, remember I told you she was up at Canisius University in Buffalo, she calls the apartment, and the baby answers the phone, and in her baby language says something's wrong with grandma. So immediately Amy De Jesus calls the 2-3 precinct, 2-3 sector. Adam responds, and they see through the window this little girl, 3 years old, duct taped, standing by the window. They break the window, they gain entry into the apartment, and what they observe is a horrific scene. 2 bodies laying on the floor, coagulated blood. They were stabbed to death. And this was the beginning of this scene. And that's what we were greeted with when we responded to this crime scene. And very early on, you do all of these canvases of the block. You do a background check on the victims. It's called victimology. And you do all of these checks, and we couldn't find anything that indicated any criminality that would have led to a crime such as this. So we were sort of baffled for the first couple of days, thinking, oh, maybe it's a gambling location, because under one of the beds, you'll see this on the New York Homicide episode, we found $16,000 in cash. So right away, we're thinking narcotics or gambling or something like that. The money turned out to be legit. The money was money for paid in rent by the 2 tenants up the stairs over, I guess, a couple of years, because Carmen Quinones was old school and she did not believe in banks, so she kept the money under her mattress, 16 grand worth. So we surmised maybe someone knew about this, and in East Harlem, someone will kill you for a lot less than $16,000. So again, we couldn't find a reason a criminal reason or anyone who would have a reason to kill Carmen Quinones. This is where victimology comes in, and I'm really speeding this whole case up. Two detectives went to uh, Ruben Frederick's wife. He had a wife in Brooklyn, interviewed her, and she's told them certain things. I can't get deeply into it now, but she said he worked for a bus company named Triborough Coach. So the detectives went to Triborough Coach and they interviewed a supervisor there, and they said, "Oh, did you recover our cell phone?" And we never did. So we knew right at that point that the murderer or murderers took the cell phone. So we were extremely happy. And we got a search warrant for that cell phone and got up on the cell phone and were able, and to cut to the chase, because I can't tell the story, it's such a long, long story, we were able to grab the person with the cell phone through following the cell phone, through cell phone pings off of cell phone towers. Don't forget, this is 2001, not 2023. The technology wasn't as good as it was today. So we get this individual and we bring him into the 2-3 squad. And he tells us that he got the phone from a guy named Raymond Mundo, who was a bad guy from the Bronx. So now we start doing computer checks and we find out that Raymond Mundo is a home invader and a stabber. So right then, we believed we knew who our killer was. And then we did something else that is commonplace in investigations and law enforcement. We ran associates arrested with, and we came up with the name of Rafael Rios, aka Doggy. What happens? It turns out that both Doggy and Raymond Mundo live in the same building in the Bronx. So that morning, very early in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, we hit both apartments. Mundo's nowhere to be found, but we grabbed Rafael Rios. And in his apartment, he's there with his wife, and we said, "You got to come with us." Never asked why, just got dressed and came with us. One of the detectives went back and spoke to the wife, and she said, "I don't know why, but he has this bag of cash of $15,000 in cash." Well, we have a double murder here. So we bring Rafael Rios back to Manhattan, and we start to interview him, and eventually he gives it up that he and Raymond Mundo were paid $15,000 to kill Carmen Quinones by a woman named Maria de Jesus, who was the new wife of Justino de Jesus, who lived on the 3rd floor, Carmen's ex-husband. I know this is convoluted and difficult to follow. So Rafael Rios gave up his part in this, and he gave us Raymond Mundo. We tracked Raymond Mundo's cell phone to a place called Willimantic, Connecticut, and we found out that his sister lived there. So we headed to Willimantic, Connecticut. And to make a long story short, we apprehended Raymond Mundo on the streets of Willimantic, Connecticut, right in front of his sister's home. We grabbed him, brought him into the state police barracks of the Connecticut State Police and started interviewing him. Detective Porteous and Freitag went at him for like 6 or 8 hours. And you have to remember, we hadn't slept in probably 3 days. At some point, they said, "We're not going to get it. We're not going to get it. He's not giving it up." So we had a 10-page confession, faxed. That's an old term, using a fax machine, faxed to Connecticut, and we read it to Raymond Mundo. Raymond Mundo, hearing that, confessed to the crime also, but blaming most of it on Dog. So that case we now had two under arrest, but one of the most important people in this case was Maria de Jesus, the new wife of Justino de Jesus, who lived on the third floor of the building of Carmen Quinones, his ex-wife. And what we learned was that Maria hired these two thugs from the Bronx to kill Carmen so that she and Justino would own the brownstone. It took 4 years to arrest Maria de Jesus because all kinds of financial information and other important information that the district attorney needed in order to get a confession was needed. In addition, the district attorney offered Rafael Rios a deal. He offered him 23 years to life instead of a life without parole sentence to testify against A, Raymond Mundo, and B, Maria de Jesus. So, at the end of this, Rafael Rios, a.k.a. Doggy, testified against Maria and Raymond Mundo, and there was a happy outcome. Both Maria de Jesus and Raymond Mundo both received life without parole. Now, this case was 22 years ago. 22 years ago. So our memories weren't exactly what they would have been had it been a couple of years or whatever. But I think we remembered the basic facts pretty well. And as a result of the outstanding work of not just the people that were on New York Homicide, myself, Lieutenant Dennis Cherns, Detective Pat Porteous, lots of other people were involved. Manhattan North Homicide, a guy named Kevin Waller, Bobby Stewart. The district attorney's office, Peter Casolero, was the lead prosecutor to this case. And a retired detective who worked for the DA's office named Jerry Giorgio, as well as Tony Rivera from Manhattan North Homicide Squad. So there's so many people that were actually involved, but for brevity's sake, they only used the three of us to tell the story on New York Homicide. So that's sort of my creation in an abbreviated way of December 1st, 2001, in El Barrio, the 2-3 precinct. 4 murders that day. And the most infamous one that we worked on, of course, the murder of Carmen Quinones and Ruben Frederick. Folks, thank you so much for listening. This is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories with another video short for you guys. Have a great day, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.